21 degrees outside, 73 degrees inside. No tent, no sleeping bag, no gear, just physics. Tonight, I'm going to build a shelter from forest debris that outperforms your home insulation. I'm talking sub-freezing temperatures on one side of the wall, t-shirt weather on the other. And I'm going to prove it with thermometers. But here's what's really going to cook your brain. I'm also rigging a heating system that's virtually smokeless and invisible from 50 feet away. Because in a real collapse scenario, a visible fire is a dinner bell for every desperate soul in a 5-mile radius. Warmth without the target on your back. That's the mission. Let's get to work. Part 2. Reading the kill zone. Everyone wants to build in the valley. The valley is flat, the valley is protected from wind, the valley has that nice little stream running through it for water access. The valley looks like the place where smart people set up camp. The valley is a death trap. Walk with me. Let me show you what I see. This depression right here. Beautiful, right? Flat ground, natural windbreak from the ridge, fallen logs for building material. Perfect campsite if you're reading a Boy Scout manual from 1962. But watch your breath. See how it sinks? See how it pools down there like fog settling into a bowl? Cold air is dense air. Dense air is heavy air. And heavy air does what heavy things do. It flows downhill, just like water, just like the laws of physics demand. That valley floor isn't a campsite. It's a frost pocket. The cold air from the entire hillside is going to drain into that depression overnight and settle there like a lake of invisible ice. You can be 10 degrees colder down there than someone 50 feet up the slope. 10 degrees. That's the difference between uncomfortable and dead. I've seen this kill people. Not directly, but I've read the reports. Hiker sets up camp in a beautiful meadow. Perfect spot. Flat, sheltered, protected from wind. They wake up at 3 a.m. shivering uncontrollably, wondering why their 20-degree sleeping bag isn't working in what was supposed to be 30-degree weather. Because it isn't 30 degrees. It's 20. It's 15. The cold air pooled around them like invisible water filling a bathtub. No, we're building on the slope, not the top. The top gets the wind, not the bottom. The bottom gets the cold. The middle. The sweet spot where the cold air flows past you like a river around a rock. There's a specific elevation band on any hillside where the temperature is optimal. Too high and you're exposed. Too low and you're in the frost pocket. Right in the middle, maybe a third of the way up from the valley floor, you find what old-timers call the thermal belt. That's where orchards get planted in areas prone to frost. That's where experienced outdoorsmen make camp. That's where we're building. But location is more than thermal dynamics. Look at this rock face. This granite slab has been sitting here since before your grandparents' grandparents were born. And for millions of years, it's been doing the same thing every single day. Absorbing solar radiation, storing thermal energy in its mass, and radiating that heat back into the environment when the sun goes down. This is thermal mass. This is a free heater. This is why you don't build in the middle of a clearing like some kind of amateur. The physics are simple but powerful. During the day, solar radiation hits this rock. The rock absorbs that energy and stores it in its mass. Granite, limestone, any dense stone has significant thermal capacity. It can hold a tremendous amount of heat energy without significantly increasing in temperature. Then, when the sun goes down and the air temperature drops, that stored energy begins to radiate back out as infrared radiation. I'm going to position my shelter to take advantage of this rock's radiant heat, not touching it. You don't want to conduct heat away from yourself through direct contact, but close, within a few feet. Close enough that the infrared radiation bouncing off this stone becomes part of my heating system.
The ideal distance is about 3 to 5 feet, close enough to benefit from the radiant heat, far enough that you're not losing heat through conduction if you accidentally roll against it in your sleep. And there's another benefit to building near a rock face. It blocks wind from one direction entirely. That's one less side of your shelter that needs to be fortified against drafts. Now let's talk about what's under our feet. The ground here slopes at about 15 degrees. That's important. Too flat and water pools around you when it rains. Too steep and you're sliding downhill all night, waking up with your feet where your head should be. 15 degrees is perfect. Water drains away. You stay in place. And there's enough angle that any cold air settling in the area flows past you rather than accumulating. I'm also checking the soil. Push your finger into the ground. What do you feel? Here, I'm getting about 2 inches of loose organic material on top of compacted earth. That organic layer is going to be part of my insulation system later. The compacted earth underneath tells me this ground drains well. It's not going to turn into a mud pit if it rains. See that depression over there? The one filled with darker soil and greener vegetation? That's a drainage channel. Water flows through there when it rains. Build your shelter there and you're sleeping in a stream bed. I've made that mistake. Once, never again. And now we address the elephant in the forest. Operational security. Listen, I'm not paranoid, but I'm also not stupid. And in any real survival situation, other humans become a variable you cannot ignore. Most people are good. Most people will help. But most is a gamble when your life is the stake. And a visible shelter, a plume of smoke, the straight lines and geometric shapes that scream human habitation are the equivalent of hanging a neon sign that says vulnerable person with supplies here. Nature doesn't make straight lines. Nature doesn't make perfect angles. The human eye, even at a distance, is incredibly good at picking out geometric regularity against the chaos of a forest. That's an evolutionary adaptation. Our ancestors needed to spot predators hiding in the brush. Now that same adaptation works against you. Think about it from a predator's perspective, and in a survival situation, that's exactly what a desperate human becomes. They're scanning the environment for resources, for opportunity, for anything that breaks the natural pattern. A wisp of smoke against the tree line, the glint of something metallic, the unnaturally straight line of a ridgepole. These signals travel much farther than you'd think. So we're going to build ugly. We're going to build irregular. We're going to break up the human silhouette and blend into the natural lines of this forest until my shelter is invisible from 30 feet away. 10 feet away, you might trip over it before you see it. This means using materials that match the local environment. No bright tarps, no reflective surfaces, everything earth-toned, everything organic, everything that looks like it belongs here. The debris covering my shelter won't just be insulation, it'll be camouflage. This isn't paranoia, this is probability management. This is acknowledging that the second greatest threat in any survival situation, after the environment itself, is other people's desperation. Right here. This is the spot. Slight slope for drainage, rock face for thermal mass, natural debris on the ground for insulation material, concealment from multiple angles, and a sight line that lets me see anyone approaching while they can't see me. Before I commit, I'm going to sit here for 5 minutes, just watching, listening, feeling the air movement. Is there a draft I didn't notice? Is there a game trail nearby that might bring curious animals through my camp at night? Is there a dead tree overhead that might come down in a windstorm? That widowmaker right there. See it? That dead branch hanging in the canopy, maybe 40 feet up. Looks stable. Isn't. One good gust of wind and it's coming down. Could be tonight, could be next year. Not worth the risk. We shift 10 feet to the left and that threat is eliminated. Now we build. Part 3. The skeleton of salvation. A shelter fails or succeeds in its first 3 minutes. Not when the rain hits, not when the temperature drops. In those first 3 minutes when you're laying down the bones, when you're committing to a structure that either distributes load like nature intended or collapses on your head at 2 a.m. like a karmic lesson in physics. Triangles. Every engineer knows this. Every architect knows this. Every bridge builder since the Romans has known this. The triangle is the strongest geometric shape in nature, not the square. Squares can rack. Apply lateral pressure to a square and it becomes a parallelogram. A triangle can't. The angles are locked. The forces are distributed along each member. It's why the A-frame has been the default emergency shelter for every culture that's ever had to survive a winter. I'm building a classic debris hut today. Think of it as a coffin-sized A-frame that you're going to stuff with so much insulation it becomes more sleeping bag than structure. Morbid name. Effective design. But before I grab a single stick, I need to establish my footprint. I'm lying down on the ground right now, arms at my sides. This is my body template. I need a shelter that's exactly this long, plus about a foot at the head for the entrance structure, and exactly this wide, plus maybe 6 inches on each side so I'm not rubbing against the walls all night. Minimum volume is the goal. Every cubic inch of air inside this shelter is air that my body has to heat. The bigger the shelter, the more energy I waste warming empty space. The smaller the shelter, the faster my body heat accumulates to a comfortable temperature. A lot of people build too big. They're thinking comfort. They're thinking about being able to sit up, move around, have some space. That's tent thinking. That's sleeping bag thinking. A debris hut isn't a room. It's a cocoon. You crawl in, you lie down, you stay there until morning. If you can sit up inside your debris hut, you've built it wrong. First element, the ridgepole. This is the spine. Everything connects to this. And because everything connects to it, it needs to be strong enough to hold your body weight plus the weight of several hundred pounds of debris without even thinking about bending. Watch what I'm grabbing. Dead standing wood. Not green wood, not rotted wood. Dead standing. This tree died on its feet and has been seasoning in the wind for however long it takes wood to reach its maximum compressive strength. It's lighter than green wood because the moisture is gone. It's stronger than rotted wood because the structural fibers are intact. Here's how you identify dead standing. The bark is usually gone or falling off. The wood is gray, not the brown or green of living wood. When you knock on it, it sounds hollow and resonant, not dull and thuddy. And critically, when you push on it, it doesn't flex. Green wood flexes. Dead standing holds rigid. Green wood is flexible. Green wood bends. That's useful for certain applications, which we'll get to, but your ridgepole needs to resist compression. It needs to hold a load without deflecting. You want dead standing hardwood if you can find it. Oak, maple, hickory, the dense, heavy woods that hold up bridges and buildings. And the test is simple. If you can snap it over your knee, it's not strong enough. If it takes your full body weight and then some, you've got your ridgepole. This piece right here is perfect. About 4 inches in diameter at the base, tapering to about 2 inches at the tip, 12 feet long, which is more than I need, but I can work with that. When I press down on the middle with my full weight, it doesn't even think about bending. That's what we want. Length matters. The ridgepole needs to extend from the ground to about armpit height at its apex. Any taller and you're creating unnecessary volume to heat. Any shorter and you're building a coffin you can't turn around in. The goal is minimum volume for maximum heat retention while still being able to lie down without your face touching the ceiling. I'm measuring now. From the ground to my armpit is about 50 inches. That's my apex height. The ridgepole will angle from there down to the ground over the length of my body plus that extra foot for the entrance. I'm using this forked tree as my support. Natural architecture. The forest is full of pre-built construction supports if you know what to look for. A forked tree, a rock, a stump. Anything that can hold one end of your ridgepole while the other end rests on the ground. The fork needs to be at the right height. Too low and my shelter is too flat. Too high and I'm wasting volume. This one is perfect. About chest height. The ridgepole sits in the fork, angles down toward the ground, and creates the spine of my shelter. But I'm not just resting the ridgepole in the fork. I'm locking it in place. See this smaller branch? I'm jamming it into the fork alongside the ridgepole, creating a wedge that prevents any lateral movement. The last thing I want is my ridgepole rolling out of the fork at 2 a.m. and dropping 300 pounds of debris on my head. Now the ribs. This is where green wood comes back into play. These are the members that angle down from the ridgepole to the ground, creating the skeletal structure of your shelter. They need to resist some compression, but they also need to bend without snapping. They need to flex under snow load without catastrophic failure. The difference between green wood and dead wood isn't just about moisture content. It's about cellular structure. In living wood, the cells are full of water and the lignin that holds them together is still flexible. The wood can bend significantly before the fibers separate and break. In dead wood, the water is gone and the lignin has hardened. The wood is stiffer and stronger in compression, but it's also brittle. It'll hold a tremendous load right up until the moment it catastrophically fails. For ribs, I want something in between. Wood that's been dead long enough to lose most of its moisture, but not so long that it's become completely rigid. When I bend it, it should flex smoothly and spring back rather than cracking or staying bent. See this? This is a perfect rib. Green enough to have tensile strength. Dead enough to have some rigidity. It bends under pressure and then springs back rather than cracking. I'm laying these ribs at a 45 to 60 degree angle from the ridgepole, steep enough to shed rain and snow. Shallow enough to not waste vertical space. They're spaced about a fist width apart, close enough that the smaller sticks I'm about to add can bridge the gap. Far enough apart that I'm not spending 3 hours finding extra ribs. The angle matters more than people realize. Too shallow and rain doesn't run off effectively. Water pools in the debris, soaks through and drips on you all night. Too steep and you're creating a tall, narrow structure that's hard to insulate and prone to collapse under its own weight. 45 degrees is my minimum. 60 degrees is my maximum. Within that range, I'm adjusting based on the specific conditions. If rain is likely, I go steeper. If I'm more concerned about snow load, I might go slightly shallower for a broader base that distributes weight better. The lattice work goes on top of the ribs. Smaller sticks, finger thickness, laid perpendicular to the ribs. This creates the mesh that's going to hold the insulation in place. Think of it like the wire mesh in fiberglass insulation. It's not providing structural support. It's providing a matrix for the insulating material to grip. I'm being methodical here. Each stick in the lattice is placed deliberately, not just thrown on. They're close enough together that debris won't fall through the gaps, but far enough apart that I'm not using more material than necessary. A hand-width spacing is about right. And speaking of structural support, snap. There it goes. See what just happened? That rib on the left just cracked under the weight of the lattice work. And do you know why? Because I grabbed a piece of dead-standing softwood instead of dead-standing hardwood. Pine, probably. Looks great. Feels solid. Breaks like a promise the moment you apply real pressure. The internal structure of softwood is completely different from hardwood. Larger cells, more air gaps, less actual material. Pine, spruce, fir. These are all softwoods. They grow fast, they're abundant, and they're practically useless for structural applications in a debris hut. The only time I use softwood in a shelter is for the lattice layer, where the pieces are small and the load on each individual stick is minimal. Now I need to replace it. This is survival. This is real. Things break. Plans fail. The difference between living and dying is whether you identify the problem, understand why it happened, and fix it before it becomes catastrophic. If this had broken tonight with 3 feet of debris on top of it, I'd have had a section of my shelter collapse onto me in my sleep. Best case, I wake up cold because there's a gap in my insulation. Worst case, I'm pinned and panicking at 3 a.m. with my body temperature dropping. Fixed. Hardwood this time. Red oak if I had to guess. You can feel the difference when you flex it. The resistance is smooth and even. Not brittle, not spongy, solid. This rib will be here long after I'm gone. One more check before we move on. I'm crawling inside the skeleton now, lying down in my sleeping position. Is there enough room? Can I roll onto my side without hitting the ribs? Is my head protected? Are my feet covered? Everything checks out. The skeleton is solid, now we can move on. Part 4. Manufacturing warmth from nothing. Here's where we separate the amateurs from the engineers. Everyone knows a debris hut needs debris. Leaves, pine needles, grass, whatever organic material is lying around in sufficient quantity. Pile it on, get inside, stay warm. Simple. Except it isn't. Because if you just pile debris on your shelter like you're raking leaves in your suburban backyard, you're going to be very confused when you're shivering at midnight wondering why your 3 feet of insulation isn't doing anything. The debris isn't the insulator. I'm going to say that again because it's the most important sentence in this entire video. The debris is not the insulator. The air trapped inside the debris is the insulator. This is how all insulation works. Fiberglass, down feathers, wool, synthetic fill. None of these materials are particularly good at stopping heat transfer on their own. What they're good at is trapping air, creating millions of tiny pockets where air molecules can't circulate, can't transfer heat through convection, can only sit there, static, providing an R value that increases with thickness. Let me break down the physics real quick. Heat moves in 3 ways: conduction, convection, radiation. Conduction is direct transfer through contact. Touch a cold surface, lose heat to that surface. We'll deal with that when we build the bed. Radiation is energy emitted as infrared waves. Everything above absolute zero radiates heat. Your body is constantly pumping out infrared radiation in all directions. We'll capture some of that with the fire reflector later. Convection is heat transfer through fluid movement, and air is a fluid. When air heats up, it becomes less dense and rises. Cooler air moves in to replace it. This circulation carries heat away from your body faster than still air ever could. Dead airspace. That's the technical term for air that can't circulate, and it's what we're manufacturing right now. Watch how I'm applying this debris. I'm not packing it down. I'm not compressing it. I'm piling it loosely. I'm maintaining the loft. Every time I add a handful of leaves, I'm adding a handful of air pockets that are going to trap heat and prevent it from escaping into the night. The type of debris matters too. Not all organic material is created equal. Dry leaves are excellent. They're naturally curved, which creates air pockets when they pile up. They interlock loosely, maintaining loft even under some compression. Oak leaves and maple leaves are my favorites. They're large, they're curved, and they last a long time before breaking down. Pine needles are good but tricky. They compress more easily than leaves, so you need a thicker layer to achieve the same R value. But they shed water better than leaves, making them ideal for the outer layer of your shelter. Grass is acceptable, but not ideal. It tends to mat down and compress, eliminating those crucial air pockets. If grass is all you have, use it, but be prepared to double or triple your insulation thickness. Ferns are underrated. Dead bracken fern in particular creates excellent dead airspace. The fronds are stiff enough to maintain loft, but branched enough to create multiple layers of air pockets. What you want to avoid is wet debris. Moisture is the enemy. It fills those air pockets with water, which conducts heat 25 times faster than air. Wet insulation is worse than no insulation because it creates a false sense of security while slowly killing you. Compress this debris and you destroy it. You squeeze out the air. You eliminate the dead airspace. You turn effective insulation into a dense mat that conducts heat almost as efficiently as wood. The measurement is simple. The walls of this shelter need to be armpit deep. That's the minimum. Elbow deep is amateur hour. Armpit deep is survival. Shoulder deep is luxury. I measure by sticking my arm straight into the pile from the outside. If my hand doesn't reach the lattice work before my armpit hits the outer surface, we're good. If it does, we need more material. Right now, I'm at wrist depth. Nowhere close. Back to work. This is the labor-intensive part. This is the part that separates people who've watched survival videos from people who've actually built shelters. You need a staggering amount of material. More than you think. More than seems reasonable. This shelter is going to consume every loose piece of organic matter within a 30-foot radius before we're done. I'm not exaggerating. A properly insulated debris hut requires roughly 400 to 600 pounds of material. That's dozens of trips. That's hours of work. That's the difference between I watched a video once and I actually know how to survive. And no, you can't shortcut this. Every square foot you leave thin is a square foot of heat loss. Every gap you leave in the coverage is a draft that will find you at 3 a.m. This is not the part of the build where you get creative or economical. This is the part where you do the work. Here's my technique. I'm gathering debris in armloads, carrying it back to the shelter and placing it on the roof starting from the bottom and working up. Like shingles on a house. Each layer overlaps the one below it. When rain hits this shelter, it'll run down the overlapping layers and drip off the bottom without soaking through. As I build up, I'm constantly checking for thin spots, running my hands over the surface, looking for places where I can see the lattice through the debris. Those are the weak points. Those are the heat leaks. I'm stuffing extra material into those gaps until the coverage is uniform. Now, the floor. This is where most people die. I'm not exaggerating. The ground kills more people than the air ever will. And the reason is simple physics that almost nobody understands. The ground is a thermal mass, and unlike the air, it's in direct contact with your body. Conduction, direct heat transfer from a warm object to a cold object through physical contact. And the ground is always cold. Even in summer, even in tropical environments. The ground is typically around 55 degrees Fahrenheit at depth, and your body is 98.6. That's a 43-degree differential, and conduction is merciless. It will pull heat out of your body 25 times faster than air at the same temperature. 25 times. Let me put that in perspective. If the air around you is 55 degrees, you might be uncomfortable, but you'll survive the night. If you're lying on 55-degree ground with no insulation, you might not make it until morning. Same temperature. Radically different outcome. Because conduction doesn't care about your comfort. It only cares about thermal equilibrium. You can have perfect walls, perfect roof, perfect door. If your floor is thin, you will wake up hypothermic. The ground will suck the life out of you while your debris walls watch and do nothing. My bed is going to be a minimum of 6 inches thick. Compacted, because unlike the walls, where we want loft and air pockets, the floor needs to be dense enough to support my weight without compressing to nothing under me. This is the engineering challenge. Walls need loft. Floor needs density. Same material, different application, opposite physical properties. When I lie down on debris, my body weight compresses the material beneath me. Those air pockets I worked so hard to create get squeezed out. The R value plummets, so I need to start with enough material that even after compression, I still have adequate insulation. I'm building this mattress in layers, base layer of larger sticks and branches to get me off the dirt. These create a foundation that can't compress because there's nothing soft about them. They're not comfortable, but they're not supposed to be. They're supposed to create a platform that holds its shape no matter what. Middle layer of pine boughs and smaller debris. This starts to add some cushion while maintaining structure. Top layer of the softest, driest leaves I can find. This is the comfort layer. This is what I'll actually be lying on. It can compress because the layers beneath it are doing the structural work. And then I'm going to lay on it, compress it, and add more material. Lay on it, compress it, add more. This process continues until I can lie down without feeling the ground's chill penetrating to my body. The test is lying down and feeling for cold spots. Any point where the ground's chill penetrates to my body, I need more material. This isn't about comfort, this is about survival. The difference between sleeping and dying is about 4 inches of dead plant matter. Pay special attention to your shoulder blades and your hips. These are the pressure points. These are where your body weight concentrates. These are where the debris compresses the most and where cold spots are most likely to develop. Let's talk about the entrance. Every opening in this shelter is a potential heat leak, and the entrance is the biggest opening by far. You can't eliminate it. You need to get in and out, but you can minimize it. I'm building this entrance just wide enough for my shoulders to squeeze through, just tall enough for me to crawl in without scraping my back. The smaller the opening, the less heat escapes, the less cold air infiltrates. The entrance should face away from the prevailing wind. Check which direction the wind is coming from and orient your shelter so the wind hits the solid debris wall, not the door. This seems obvious, but I've seen people build shelters with the entrance facing directly into the wind because that's where the view was better. And I'm building a door, a plug, a removable section of debris that I can pull into place behind me once I'm inside. It doesn't need to be fancy. It needs to be thick enough to match the R value of the walls and big enough to completely seal the entrance. I'm making this plug from a bundle of debris wrapped in my spare shirt. The shirt holds the debris together. The debris provides the insulation. It's shaped to fit snugly into the entrance opening. When I pull it into place behind me, the shelter is completely sealed. This is the difference between a shelter and a sleeping bag. A sleeping bag has an opening at your face. Your breath escapes, your heat escapes, the cold air exchanges. A properly sealed debris hut retains your body heat like a closed system. You're essentially marinating in your own thermal output. Sounds uncomfortable. It's not. It's survival. Part 5. The invisible furnace fire is cheating. I mean that in the best possible way. Fire is the ultimate human technology, the thing that separates us from everything else that ever lived on this planet. Control of combustion, the ability to create heat on demand. It's cheating at the game of survival, and I am absolutely going to cheat. But fire is also a liability. Light, smoke, sound, the crack of burning wood, the scent that carries for miles. Fire is a beacon. Fire is a signal. Fire says, there's a human here with the resources to make fire. Come find them. In a wilderness survival situation, that might not matter. In a collapse scenario, where resources are scarce and desperation is high, that signal could be lethal. So we're going to build a fire that minimizes these problems, not eliminates. You can't have fire without some signature, but we can reduce the visibility radius from miles to hundreds of feet. We can keep the smoke production so low that it dissipates before it rises above the tree line. We can make this fire invisible to everyone who isn't standing on top of it. First principle. Dry fuel burns clean. Most smoke is uncombusted particulates. Moisture from the wood that vaporizes but doesn't ignite. Carbon that doesn't reach combustion temperature before it's carried up the smoke column. Wet wood equals smoke. Dry wood equals efficiency. Here's the chemistry. Wood is mostly cellulose and lignin. When you heat it to around 300 degrees Fahrenheit, those compounds start to break down. They release volatile gases. Those gases are what actually burn. The flames you see aren't the wood burning. They're the gases released from the wood burning. If the wood is wet, a significant portion of the heat energy goes into vaporizing that moisture instead of breaking down cellulose. The volatile gases are released at lower temperatures, mixed with steam, and don't fully combust. That's smoke. That's wasted energy. That's a signal visible for miles. I've been gathering fuel for an hour. Dead standing wood that's been drying for months. I've been storing it under cover, keeping it away from the damp ground. And before I use any piece, I'm snapping it to check the interior. If the core is gray and dry, it burns clean. If the core is dark and moist, it goes in the backup pile. The snap test tells you a lot. Dry wood snaps cleanly with a sharp crack. Wet wood bends before it breaks, and when it does break, the sound is dull and fibrous. Learn that distinction and you'll never accidentally feed wet wood into a fire that needs to stay low signature. Second principle. Small fires burn hot. A hot fire consumes its own smoke. The combustion is more complete. The particulates ignite instead of escaping. A small hot fire produces less smoke than a large smoldering one. And you don't need a large fire. You need heat. And heat is more efficiently produced by a concentrated burn than a spread out one. This is counterintuitive for people raised on campfire culture. Bigger fire equals more warmth, right? Wrong. A large fire produces more total heat, but it also wastes more energy heating air that rises away from you. A small fire, properly positioned and reflected, delivers more usable heat to your body while consuming less fuel and producing less signature. The size of your fire should be measured in fist widths, not foot widths. A fire the size of 2 fists produces plenty of heat if you're capturing and directing it properly. Third principle, location and reflection. This is where the physics gets interesting. Fire radiates heat in all directions. A campfire in the open is sending 50% of its heat into the sky and the trees and everywhere except your body. You're capturing maybe a quarter of the energy you're producing. The rest is waste. We're going to capture that waste. The reflector wall is one of the oldest tricks in the book. A wall of logs stacked behind the fire, positioned so that the infrared radiation bouncing off it redirects back toward the shelter. You're essentially doubling the efficiency of your fire by capturing the heat that would otherwise disappear into the night. Infrared radiation travels in straight lines. It behaves like light. Angle of incidence equals angle of reflection. So the geometry of your reflector matters. You want the reflected heat to hit your shelter entrance, not the ground or the trees. This means the reflector needs to be angled slightly forward at the top, leaning toward the fire. I'm building this wall about 2 feet behind the fire pit, close enough that the reflection angle sends heat into my shelter entrance, far enough that the wood doesn't dry out and become a fire hazard itself. Green logs are better here. They contain more moisture, resist ignition longer, and can tolerate being close to the flames without catching. The wall is about 3 feet high and 4 feet wide. That's big enough to capture most of the heat radiating backward from the fire and redirect it toward me. Each log is laid horizontally, stacked like Lincoln logs. The gaps between them are filled with smaller sticks and debris to create a solid reflective surface. But here's the real magic: the super shelter effect. See this clear plastic? It's not a tarp, it's a membrane. And it's going to turn this entire setup into a greenhouse. The physics is beautiful. Light from the fire and sunlight during the day is short-wave radiation. It passes through clear plastic like it's not even there. That energy hits the back wall of my shelter, the reflector wall, the ground, everything inside, and it gets absorbed. Those surfaces heat up. But when those heated surfaces radiate that energy back out, it's no longer short-wave radiation. It's long-wave thermal radiation, infrared. And here's the key: plastic blocks infrared. The energy goes in. It can't get out. It's trapped. The temperature inside the plastic-covered space climbs and stabilizes at a level significantly higher than the outside air. It's the same principle that makes your car unbearably hot on a sunny day. The same principle that makes greenhouses work. The same principle that's raising the average global temperature by trapping solar radiation in our atmosphere. We're using planetary-scale physics to heat a coffin-sized shelter, and it works. I'm positioning this plastic so it covers the entrance of my debris hut, stretching from the ground to a point above the fire. The heat from the fire passes through. The heat from my body, from the warm debris, from the reflector wall, all of it gets trapped in this space. The temperature differential is going to be absurd. The plastic doesn't need to be perfect. Any clear or translucent plastic works. Painter's drop cloth. Garbage bags split open. Emergency space blankets have the same effect, though they're reflective rather than transparent. The key is creating an enclosed space where infrared radiation can't escape. Now, the smoke issue. I've built a small fire pit with a specific geometry. A shallow hole, about 4 inches deep, with a raised platform of rocks in the center. The fire burns on the rocks, elevated off the ground. This does 2 things. First, it allows air to circulate under the fire, providing oxygen from below as well as from the sides. A well-oxygenated fire burns hotter and cleaner. More complete combustion. Less smoke. Second, it keeps the fire off the damp soil. Soil moisture is a smoke generator. Even when the soil looks dry on the surface, there's moisture underneath. Heat draws that moisture upward. It vaporizes into the fire. It creates smoke. Raise the fire off the ground, eliminate the contact, reduce the smoke. The rocks serve another purpose. They absorb heat during the fire and continue radiating that heat after the flames die down. If I let the fire burn out before sleep, the rocks will continue providing warmth for hours. It's like having a thermal battery. And I've positioned this fire where the air currents work for me. There's a slight downslope breeze tonight, moving from the ridge toward the valley. My fire is on the uphill side of my shelter. The smoke drifts down, away from the sleeping area, and disperses in the lower terrain before it has a chance to rise into a visible column. This isn't perfect. There's still smoke. You can still smell it if you're close. But from 100 feet away, in the dark, there's no visible plume, no obvious light signature, just a slightly warmer patch of forest that could be anything. One more detail. The fire pit itself is concealed from horizontal view. I've built up a small berm of soil and rocks around it. From ground level, even if someone were looking directly at my camp, the flames themselves are hidden. They'd see the glow reflecting off the trees maybe. But not the fire itself. and without a visible flame, they're less likely to investigate. Survival isn't just about defeating the environment, it's about not advertising your defeat of the environment to everyone else who's trying to do the same thing. Part 6. Numbers don't lie. It's getting dark. The temperature's dropping. I can feel it now. That transition from jacket weather to oh no happens fast once the sun goes down. The ground starts radiating its stored heat. The air chills from the top down, and every minute you're not in your shelter is a minute your core temperature is fighting a losing battle. Time to test the hypothesis. I've got 2 thermometers, simple ones, nothing fancy. One is hanging from a branch about 10 feet from the shelter entrance. That's our control. That's outside. The other is inside the debris hut, tucked into a corner where it can measure the ambient temperature of the sleeping space. Right now, both read the same, 42 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not bad. That's actually pretty mild for a winter night, but it's going to drop. The forecast says low 20s by midnight. And I'm going to stay in this shelter until dawn to prove that what we built isn't a theory, it's engineering. I'm lighting the fire now, small, hot. The tinder catches immediately because it's been stored dry. The kindling follows. I'm building this fire slowly and deliberately because a rushed fire is a smoky fire. Every step is about complete combustion, about maximizing heat while minimizing signature. First, the tinder bundle, dry grass, birch bark, tiny twigs, material that ignites from a spark and burns hot enough to light the kindling. Then pencil-thick sticks, laid in a teepee formation over the tinder, close enough that the flames can jump from stick to stick, but with enough air gaps for oxygen circulation. Then finger-thick branches, same formation, building up gradually, never smothering the fire with too much fuel, never letting it die down from too little. The plastic is already doing its job. I can feel the temperature change the moment I'm under it. The air isn't just warmer, it's calmer. Less wind, less convection. The dead air principle is working at macro scale. Into the shelter. It's tight in here, by design. Minimum volume for maximum heat retention. I'm essentially wearing this structure like a second skin, and I can already tell something is different. The ground isn't cold. 6 inches of compressed debris between me and the soil, and it's working. My back is warm, my legs are warm, the conduction pathway is blocked. I'm pulling the door plug into place behind me, sealing the entrance. And now it's just me, my body heat, and the physics of dead air space. Let's talk about what's happening. My body is producing about 100 watts of heat just by existing, just through normal metabolic function. If I start shivering, that goes up. But I don't want to shiver. Shivering is a last resort. Shivering burns calories I can't afford to replace. The goal is a shelter efficient enough that I never trigger the shivering response. That 100 watts is radiating into the debris around me. The debris walls are absorbing it. The trapped air pockets are preventing convection. The heat isn't escaping. It's accumulating. I'm sitting in a slowly warming cocoon of my own thermal output. An hour passes. I check the inside thermometer. 58 degrees. Outside, the other thermometer reads 31. We've crossed the freezing threshold. And inside my debris hut, I'm sitting at 58 degrees with nothing but body heat. 58 isn't warm, but it's not cold either. It's need a light jacket weather, it's curl up and sleep comfortably weather, and it's 40+ degrees warmer than the alternative. But we're not done. The fire is still going, the super shelter effect is still working, and the reflector wall is bouncing radiant heat into my space. 2 hours. Inside, 67 degrees. Outside, 24. The temperature differential is now 43 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the insulating power of properly constructed dead air space and physics. I'm taking off my jacket. I'm serious. 67 degrees is room temperature. 67 degrees is walking around in a t-shirt weather, and it's 24 degrees outside with no wind chill, which means the effective temperature out there is potentially even lower. 3 hours. Inside, 73 degrees. Outside, 21. I'm stripping to my base layer, a single long sleeve shirt, and I'm comfortable. Actually comfortable, not survivable. Comfortable. The kind of comfortable where you forget you're in a life-threatening environment because your body isn't screaming at you anymore. This is what we were trying to prove. This isn't survival. This is thriving. This is understanding the rules of the game and playing them so well that the game becomes easy. The physics haven't changed. The thermodynamics are the same for me as they are for the hypothermic hiker dying on the valley floor. The difference is engineering. The difference is knowledge. The difference is not just surviving the night, but making the night irrelevant. I'm going to sleep. Real sleep. Not the half-conscious shivering doze that most people experience in emergency shelters. Actual, restorative, wake-up refreshed sleep. Because my body isn't fighting, It's resting. And when dawn comes, I'm going to be stronger than I was when the sun went down. That's the goal. That's always the goal. Come out the other side better than you went in. Part 7. The calorie equation. Morning. Fire's dead. Plastic greenhouse effect is finished. Sun's not up yet. Inside thermometer 61 degrees. Outside 19. 42-degree differential. No active heat source, just dead airspace doing its job. Here's the math that matters. Building this shelter burned about 1,200 calories. Hard labor, 4 hours of work. Sleeping exposed in 21-degree weather, shivering burns 400 calories per hour. 8 hours of shivering is 3,200 calories, if you survive at all. I invested 1,200, I saved 3,000. That's not survival, that's profit. Now I'm warm, but I'm also thirsty, and that stream water will destroy your intestines within 48 hours. Subscribe, you're going to need it.